Before I begin, I'd like to thank CurlyFox66 for allowing me to use this story from her Reddit post in Creepy Encounters. This story is told in the perspective of a female. I don't really know how to start this other than I'm a 14-year-old girl who loves her life. I live in northern Illinois, surrounded by cornfields and woods. There's a creek that runs from the front to the east of the house, so we get a lot of deer and other game, which makes it a good location for hunting. And people do hunt there. They own one of the barns on our property. That one is the furthest down the hill from my home. It was around early October when this event took place. I had just turned 14 as my birthday was in late September. I had been home from school because that very day I had strep throat, so it was around 4:47 that evening when my mom called me and said I needed to deliver some candles to my neighbor, Tony, that lived down the street. I live at the very end of our neighborhood, down a long gravel road, and she lived kind of in the middle of the street, so it was kind of a long walk from my house. I wasn't used to going into the neighborhood by myself. I usually forced one of my older brothers to escort me, but no one was home at the time, so I tried to convince my mom that I was too sick to go. That didn't change her mind. She assured me it would only take a few minutes, so I sucked it up and went by myself. I put on a sweatshirt and exited my house, turning on my flashlight on my phone. My phone was low on battery, so I needed to be quick. I left my garage and I walked across my driveway. I saw the hunters down at the barn. It didn't faze me. They were usually down there smoking and blaring music, but that night, they were just hanging out in their truck. Not blaring music, not smoking, or lighting burn piles on fire. Again, it didn't strike me as unusual, so I continued down the gravel road to my neighborhood. It wasn't that cold out, but it was cloudy, and there was no moon that night, so it was very dark. Not just, oh yeah, it's nighttime, dark, but without my flashlight, or without the house lights, I could only make out vague shapes, and being sick and nonetheless tired didn't make it any better. Anyway, I made it to my neighborhood and walked down a couple rows of houses, searching for Tony's. Everything was quiet and most people had their lights off. Then I could see some very bright lights in the corner of my eye. To face the hunter's pickup down the street. Then past me, I saw the driver's arm sticking out the window with a bottle in his hand. I rolled my eyes. What a bunch of idiots. I continued down the road, knowing that Tony's house was nearby. I eventually came to her house. I could tell she wasn't home due to her lights being off and the absence of cars in her driveway. I was too tired to wait, so I just left the candles on their doorstep and headed home. I was about 4 houses from the gravel road that leads to my house when I heard loud music and tires speeding down the street, when I again turned to see the blinding sight of headlights growing closer. I was blinded at first, going from staring at the dim light of a flashlight to the painful rays of a truck's headlights. Then, by the time my eyes adjusted, I noticed there were 2 trucks this time. The first one flew right past me, but the second one slowed down to where I was standing. When I noticed they were slowing down, I freaked out a little inside, so I continued walking in hopes they wouldn't try to talk to me. As the truck came closer, I heard the window roll down and the sound of 2 men snickering along with the now more clear lyrics of a country song filling the air. The passenger looked at me and smiled, a disgusting smile. His teeth were stained an unhealthy yellow, probably from smoking. "Need a ride?" he asked, slurring his speech. He was clearly drunk as hell. I had no intentions of talking to him. I tried staying calm and replied back a polite "no" and walked faster. The truck stayed with me. He then tried to convince me to get a ride from them. He then made a remark about my body, and that made my blood run cold. He then continued to try and pressure me to get into the car, despite clearly being drunk. I'm sure he knew what no meant. "No, I'm good. You can go now." I had lost my voice, so it was very raspy and quiet. I hoped he heard me. I heard him snicker with the driver again. He wasn't going to give up, and I knew it. I glared at him with the coldest and most unforgiving way I could. "Why don't you fuck off, Grandpa?" I had lost my cool. He gave me a look. He was clearly offended and everything went quiet. We were almost to the gravel road until suddenly he reached through the window and grabbed the loose fabric of my sweatshirt and yanked me to the truck, hard. My shoulder slammed violently into the door, causing it to throb in pain. I yelped and tried to get away. He began mumbling something. I could only make out a few words, and I began trying to call for help, but I couldn't even scream for help because it sounded like a whisper due to my condition. I struggled to get out of his grasp. The truck was at a complete stop when I heard the driver open his door. I started flailing even more. The driver came around the back and hit me in the head with a bottle. It was such a sharp pain that spread through my entire head. I hit my head on the side of the door and I began bleeding. I started crying and thrashing around so much that I elbowed the guy behind me in the nose. He fell down swearing. Instinctively, while he was down, I took the opportunity to bite the arm of the guy holding me. I bit so hard, it felt like I was biting into a hairy Tootsie Roll. Plus, I have braces, so maybe that helped make it more painful. Maybe. I heard the guy scream profanities at me, calling me a bitch and a cunt, and he let go and I wasted no time getting the hell away from the scene. You know how in horror movies people are always complaining how the victims are always falling down and basically forget how to run? Now I can never shame them because I understand. Because, well, running for fun or sport and running for fear of your life are two completely different circumstances. And trying to run in the dark down a gravel road when fear overtakes all your senses is really hard. My legs felt like jelly. I was shaking so bad. My feet were heavy. I kept feeling like I was going to fall forward, and every rock was like ice. My head was spinning from the force of the hit. I heard the truck start up behind me and tires screeching against the pavement. Luckily, on the right of the road is a forest that leads into a field, and I bolted into the trees for cover. I heard the truck stop again and doors slamming shut, and shouting echoed all around me. I couldn't tell how close they were to me. I couldn't tell where I was going. Where they were, I felt disoriented. I was forcing my legs not to completely give out. I was sore, I could barely breathe. Every inhale felt like daggers driving into my lungs. I realized that the men could see me because my flashlight on my phone was on, shining through my sweatshirt. I struggled to put in the password and turn it off before dropping it. I literally freaked the fuck out. I stopped and ran back to get my phone when I realized how close they were. I scrambled to the ground and behind a cluster of bushes. My legs had finally given out and I was violently shaking, trying to control my breathing. I heard the men talking. I couldn't tell how near or far they were. My head was spinning and it was throbbing in pain from a headache. I closed my eyes and counted 10, inhaling and exhaling calmly. My eyes and throat stung and my ankles hurt. The men were looking around. They were stomping around through the crispy leaves and sticks. "Here, kitty, 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 kitty," they kept saying, slurring in the drunkest fashion I have ever heard. I tried to crawl over to a large oak tree. I remember the oak tree had a large hole in the base of it because me and my brothers would play hide and go seek, and that was my favorite hiding place. The men were walking away, and I began crawling as fast and as quietly as I could. The tree is about 3 yards away, and I had no cover. I was very fearful for being exposed. I kept going, peering around for them. I made it to the tree and I climbed in. I felt relieved and safe. I curled up into the small space I had and tried to stay warm. I waited there for what seemed like forever until I heard the truck doors shut, but it didn't leave. I peeked out from the hole in the tree and saw nothing. I shakily stood up and kept very quiet. It was dark, and chances are, if I couldn't see that well, a couple of drunks couldn't see any better. I began walking through the forest in the direction of my house. I couldn't see that much, so it took me a little while. Every once in a while, I would trip over a branch, and one time my own feet. Anyway, coming to the edge of the woods, I saw the bright headlights flash in front of me, and then go past me. They drove on for a while and stopped. When I emerged from the forest, the truck was parked in my driveway. The other truck drove up and parked with them. I began to break down. I hid behind some trees again and began sobbing. I was going to die. I knew it. I didn't want to die. I hadn't lived long enough. I had a mini panic attack and I had no choice but to wait there. It was cold and dark. Then I remembered my phone. Then I began thinking my phone would be too bright. They might see it. And then they could hear me talking, but I decided to just go for it. It was the best chance I had. I called my dad and began explaining what happened. My dad freaked the fuck out and told me to wait where I was, and he was calling the cops and coming home. I did as I was told and waited there, looking behind the tree every once in a while. I was scared still, but I knew I was going to be okay, and I was. Eventually they left. They drove right past me and I chewed on my sleeve in anxiety. Even though they were gone, I stayed in the woods. I didn't even want to move. I was paralyzed. My shoulder still hurt from the man, my head throbbed with a headache, and my throat stung. The blood had clotted around the cut on my forehead, but blood stained my clothes and face. I waited in silence. Nothing seemed real. It all seemed like a dream. I felt like I could wake up and everything would have never happened, and I'd still be happy and safe. But it wasn't a dream. I just couldn't wake up. It was as real as ever, but I didn't want to accept it. Everything was so surreal. Both my parents came home, and shortly after, the police. There was a 4-day investigation before 2 men were caught. They confessed to being drunk and trying to take me, and the one who grabbed me apparently had also been accused of manslaughter, fined more than once for speeding and driving under the influence, and both were linked to 3 rapes. I am honestly, truly lucky to have gotten away from them. The driver was sentenced to 14 years in prison, and the other was sentenced to 28 years. I never thought this would happen to me, honest to God. To this day, I still question everything I did and what happened. I felt like a deer being chased down by wolves, hopeless and afraid for my life. I don't know where I'll be in 28 years, but I hope I never see those sick men again in my life, and I hope nobody else has to go through what I had to. No one should feel like that. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Now, this story, I read it and I knew I had to do a reading for it. It's truly a terrifying story, and one I just knew I had to do a reading for. It's calling out to me. It was really hard to do this reading though, because for me, I'm not essentially too comfortable, I guess, with doing female perspectives. I feel like I can't embody that, and it's very difficult for me. But guys, I have absolutely enjoyed making videos. I love this. I love this stuff. This is my bread and butter. I love telling stories. I love doing this. So it's really truly a lot of fun for me. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, make sure to give it a like, and if you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe. I'm going to try to post at least once a week, make a video, even if it's just a short story, or if it's one of these longer ones. Definitely, I mean, you're going to keep seeing it, because I'm going to keep doing it. I promise you. Anyway, guys, thank you again, and I hope you have a nice day. Happy Thanksgiving. Later.